everyone, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to today's webinar, where we'll discuss experiences of recovery and social integration of people with substance use disorders. My name is Isabella Araújo, and I'm a member of the Demand Reduction Unit team at the Executive Secretariat of the Inter-American Drug Abuse Control Commission, also known as CICAD, at the Organization of American States, the OAS. It is a pleasure for me to welcome you to this virtual roundtable. Before we start, I want to let you know that we have interpretation into English and Spanish. So to select the language of your preference, please click on the globe icon on the bottom right corner of your screen and select your language. I'm going to give the same message, same instructions in Spanish now. Antes de empezar, quisiera informarles que contamos con interpretación al español y al inglés. Para seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia, por favor, dele clic al icono del mundo en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. So, as part of our opening ceremony today, we have our Executive Secretary of CICAD, Ambassador Adam Nam, followed by 4 experts panelists who will be presenting at today's webinar. So first, we have Stuart Green, Aspire Service Manager at the Doncaster Care Group, Drug and Alcohol Services in England, United Kingdom, who will be presenting on the lived experiences recovery organizations. After Dr. Green, we have Colette Curlew, Director of Client Services, National Council on Drug Abuse and CDA Jamaica, presenting on utilizing an integrated approach for drug treatment for clients. Then we will welcome Monica Barsanti, Head of the International Relations at San Patrignano, Italy, presenting on recovery and stigma, the experience of San Patrignano. And finally, we have Daniela Nieto, Deputy Head of the Social Integration Area at the National Service for Prevention and Rehabilitation of Drug and Alcohol Use in Chile, presenting on social integration and recovery model, the Chilean experience. At the end of our presentations, we will have a Q&A session. So please type your questions to the presenters in the chat or click on the Q&A icon and type in your questions. We'll try to take as many questions as possible within the time that we have for this webinar. And finally, in our closing ceremony today, we will have the Demand Reduction Unit Chief of OAS CICAD, Jimena Kalowski, delivering some remarks to you. So without further delays, I would like to invite now Ambassador Adam Nam, Executive Secretary of CICAD, to deliver his opening remarks. Ambassador Nam, good morning, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Isabella. Hello to everyone, and welcome to today's virtual roundtable on experiences of recovery and social integration of people with substance use disorders. This is a very important topic, given that 35 million people on a global level suffer from drug use disorders. In 2021 alone, roughly 275 million people have used drugs, up from 226 million in 2010. While the number of people with drug use disorders has increased, only 1 in 7 people receive treatment, only 1 in 7. The availability of treatment interventions has remained low as our healthcare systems face an increasingly tough task. Shortages in these services are felt most in poorer countries, and this is despite overwhelming evidence that the cost of treating drug use disorders is much lower than the cost of untreated drug dependence. In 2020, CICAD approved the OAS Hemispheric Drug Strategy and its corresponding plan of action for 2021 to 2025. In these important documents, OAS member states recognize that drug use is a complex social, multi-causal, dynamic, and heterogeneous issue that requires an interdisciplinary and intersectoral evidence-based public health approach. Regarding demand reduction, OAS member states recognize the need for a comprehensive and balanced approach to address the drug problem, including robust prevention, treatment, and recovery support. When specifically looking at the area of recovery and social integration, our member states have committed to addressing this problem through a multifaceted approach, which includes the following. First, respect for human rights and addressing stigma. Stigma often results in the exclusion and social marginalization of those with substance use disorders, deterring individuals with drug dependence from seeking, accessing, and/or completing demand reduction services. As part of its hemispheric analysis, CCAD's Multilateral Evaluation Mechanisms 2022 publication showed that addressing stigma and social marginalization is an area requiring much improvement in the region, and that member states should be encouraged to address this issue. Second, CCAD seeks to promote the availability of and facilitating increased access to care and treatment programs. Third, CCAD seeks to promote access to treatment services that offer a range of comprehensive therapeutic intervention models and that are evidence-based and follow internationally validated quality standards oriented towards treatment completion and sustained recovery. And fourth, CCAD has as a priority exploring means of offering treatment, rehabilitation, and recovery support services to minor or nonviolent criminal offenders who use drugs as an alternative to incarceration. We also believe that the promotion of regional and international cooperation, as well as sharing best practices, is a key component of our efforts to address the magnitude of the global drug problem. I thank our existing partners and also welcome future collaboration in this important area. Before concluding, I would like to thank our guest speakers today, Dr. Stuart Green from Doncaster Care Group, England, Monica Barzante from San Patrignano, Italy, as well as the experts from our member states, Colette Curlew from the National Council on Drug Abuse of Jamaica, and Daniela Nieto from the National Service for Prevention and Rehabilitation of Drug and Alcohol Use in Chile. I thank you all in advance for sharing your experiences in addressing stigma, substance use recovery, and social integration of individuals with substance use disorders. My thanks also to our CCAD Demand Reduction Unit Chief, Jimena Kalowski, and her team, especially Isabella Araujo, for organizing this important virtual roundtable. I wish you a productive discussion and hope that you can take with you some important lessons from the shared experiences to be presented here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nam, for your opening remarks and for joining us this morning in this important webinar. Thank you. I would like to now invite Stuart Green, Aspire Service Manager at the Doncaster Care Group, Drug and Alcohol Services in England, United Kingdom, to present on the lived experience recovery organizations. Stuart, good morning or good afternoon to you. Thank you for being with us here today, and you have the floor.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share a short presentation. I've also joined by my colleague, Dave Hyam from The Well, who is actually part of and runs Aliro, a very successful Aliro in the UK in the Northwest. So he'll chip in, and he does have to dip out, but he will join us for the Q&A. So hopefully you can see that slide now. Is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, we can
Brilliant.
see you.
Okay, so I'm Stuart Green. I'm the service manager of a statutory addiction services in the UK. I'm in long-term recovery, so I've got lived experience of 22 years plus, and I was actually one of the patients that went through this service I now manage. The service roughly is valued at about 6 million UK pounds, and we've got just over 1,500 people in our treatment service. So a lot of what we'll discuss today, or what we're going to present today, looks at strength-based initiatives and where people are assets in their own recovery and well-being. So in the UK, one of the better things to come out of the pandemic was the way we can connect. And today, obviously, we're connecting on Zoom, which is absolutely fantastic. In the UK, what we've seen up and down the country is, in a lot of areas, is very passionate individuals develop lived experience recovery organisations, strength-based opportunities for people in recovery, sometimes in addiction, to go and get and connect and get help and support and identification. So traditionally in the UK, everything is commissioned and provided through a deficit-based model, a health needs assessment, what harms, trying to reduce harms, and rightly so. But equally, from a strength-based approach, how well is our communities? So what we're looking at today is about LEROs and lived experience recovery organisations and how they're part of the sum. So if we were to look at a glass of water and is it half full or half empty, your LERO half full and your healthcare system looks at the half empty, but together it's the glass. So for me, it's about both parts and how they come together and minding the gap. So when we look at LEROs, I want to start with a very visual representation, and this is Dave Hyam's LERO, who's on the call today. Dave, do you just want to describe some of what's on the screen?
Yeah, so I'm Dave Hyam. I'm the founder and chief exec of the Well Communities. I'm in long-term recovery myself. I've been in recovery for 17 years from addiction, trauma, and the criminal justice system. I spent more time in the prison system than I did in the community. I did not know how to function in the community, and I really seen the gap that lived experience can bring within that community and working with other organisations. And these are some of the activities and some of the staff and community members here on these pictures. And that's the bottom left-hand corner. Now I'm looking at it as the Well Communities and our well-fed social supermarket. So not only do we support people in addiction, we also support our communities and fertilise that soil by opening a social supermarket for those in poverty and on the breadline, where then that comes a gateway for other issues that might arise. And one of the big reasons, you know, I got involved in the College of Lived Experience and founded with Stuart and other colleagues is we're not just here for the fluffy stuff. Lived experience is not just to go on a park run or help clean streets. We are professionals with lived experience. We have the qualifications that need to run a quality service, and here we cover services right across the Northwest, and these are people in lived experience, holding down jobs, engaging people in the community and making our communities a safer place to live for everyone. Because when we get well, we become better than well, meaning we become service to that community. Top left-hand corner, we're working with the council to clean our streets. So these are where our kids grow up. This is where I play. This is where I work. So therefore, we need to make it a better place to live. We need to fertilise that soil. So our guys go out and clean them streets. We help people with their gardens. We're doing our health and well-being on the top right. Our guys training for a Couch to 5K recovery run, getting people not just in addiction, mental health, trauma, family members all coming together. And that's bottom right, where we come to do the Couch to 5K in Morecambe Prom. If you don't know where that is, it's where Tyson Fury, the boxer, runs on a daily basis in Morecambe. So together, and what Stuart's just said about glass half full and half empty, together we create an amazing service with lived experience recovery organisations and statutory organisations. Over to you, Stu.
Thank you. And I think treatment services have their part to play. So, you know, people get well and treated in hospitals, but stay well in communities. So when we look at it, LEROs are almost the fences at the top of the cliff and hospitals at the bottom of the cliff. We need to help people stay well in communities. If people stay well in communities, they don't end up in our hospitals and in our services. And also one of the key factors of recovery is putting something back. So what are the characteristics of LEROs? So hopefully these slide decks can be shared with you. I'm just going to pick out a few. So the characteristics is they haven't got specific KPIs or targets. What they do is they support people. I love the saying, they love people until they can learn to love themselves. And I think that's a really powerful statement. There is no race in this, but equally, I run a professional service at the moment that's commissioned. I can refer to my professional colleagues in LEROs that will support people outside of normal working time. How do they connect? How do they get on in life? How do they make new friends? So again, it's that half full, half empty glass. One of the things we found during the pandemic is that through Zoom, often the best kept secret in the local community was the LERO. And what we've been able to do in the UK is bring a network of LEROs together. We're pushing about 60 LEROs at the minute, which have come together and looked at some of the characteristics. What is a LERO? And what we found was through Professor David Best, is that the CHIME model fits really well, which is LEROs have a really strong sense of connection, hope, identity, meaning and empowerment. Really key in that, really, really key. And that's how healthy that group of people is. And you've got to foster this. You can't directly commission it. You can't institutionalize it. It's got to be fostered within the community. So you've got to talent spot those key community animators, those people in recovery that want to make a difference, and then foster that and try and encourage them to develop activities. One thing with LEROs is the more people that you have in a LERO, the bigger it gets. With services, the more people you have in services, the more crowded it gets and the more waiting times there are. So LEROs have an exponential growth, the more well people that are in it. So it's a really good model. In terms of the principles, if you look at asset-based community development, that is a lot of the principles for LEROs. So that's the slide on CHIME. This slide deck will come out. More than happy to look at that. We're starting to look at how we can measure how good our LEROs are against this model. And we see this as scaffolding rather than a cage. So it's an opportunity to make sure we're inclusive and we don't marginalize or stifle development or innovation within LEROs. I think when we look at traditional helping relationships, we often don't give the patient that sat in front of us or the person sat in front of us enough credit. When you look at the tenacity that goes into drug using or drinking, there's a lot of energy spent in procuring or getting drugs or alcohol. If we can redirect that into being well, there's a lot an individual can do outside of that traditional helping relationship or that one-to-one session. So how do we harness that? I think the other part of LEROs is it's a very much a co-produced model. So they work with the individual. There's an equality and a respect around how they worked, and it's not done to or provided to, it's done with and how do we. So LEROs are great at helping people go to stuff, connect to stuff, and often people are fearful about where they are in terms of recovery and what their next step is. LEROs are great at connecting that. So rather than print 1,000 leaflets out and find that no one follows the advice on the leaflet because they want to go to a club, if you can connect them to a LERO, lived experience, recovery contagion happens. Next thing you've got that conduit and people are moving on and getting on with their life. I think society, and hopefully Monica will talk a bit about stigma, but the language we use, the people, I'm not wholly comfortable with the word addict. It may fit well in a 12-step or fellowship meeting, but outside, I think there's a lot of stigma attached to substance misuse, which ironically fuels substance misuse rather than breaks it down. So if you see substance misuse as a self-inflicted problem, you become part of the problem as well. Families, historically in the UK, we've done a lot with families. We see that they're in the way. We put them in family centres and visitors rooms, but they are a really powerful catalyst and support network for people in recovery. And actually they want to help, and we can break that codependency. So we talk about Lero-centered helping. And I think it's about going at people's own paces. And I love what Rosbeth Moss-Kanter said is people who don't want to be helped can experience it as violence is done to them. It's very strong and provocative words, but I think it's true. And Leros go at people's speed. And that is really positive in terms of that. I think also when you look at strength-based and Lero-based stuff, healthcare hasn't changed much. We're still grappling in the UK about how traditional healthcare works with Leros, and we'll come on to that on the final slide deck. And we've made some amazing inroads in terms of how we see ourselves as recovery orientated systems of care. So not only do doctors provide pills and potions, and that's rightly so, but equally Leros provide the connection, the hope, the ambition, and the community and the ground for people to get well. So I think this is where we are at the minute in the UK. And there's quite a lot of suspicion at times between treatment services and Leros and treatment services, different viewpoints, but different lenses, but equally the power of co-production between the two is absolutely enormous. We see that often in rehab settings with therapeutic communities and how people grow off each other and staff keep the boundaries in rehab often. So I think language, we touched on language. Treatment services, we call them patients, clients. We talk about access and completion. In Leros, we're talking about people, friends, cups of tea, stories, jobs, homes, and friends. When we talk about stigma, I think what we look at is in terms of society, you've got the disapproval, you've got social characteristics of marginalized groups like homelessness and often street drinking. That reinforces stuff, and there's nothing worse than personal stigma. When you look at personal stigma, you know, poverty isn't a lifestyle choice or being lazy, it's often opportunities. So I think we're a great believer. Leros are really good at smashing stigma and making visible differences in communities. And if you want a community to thrive, next to faith-based organizations helping that community, Leros are the best, because Leros want to put back, they want to give back. That is part of staying well. You see that both in fellowship meetings, but also in Leros, and they certainly want a nice community in what they live and thrive in. Okay, this is quite a complicated slide, and this is the UK model. What it shows, it's a bit like a stick of rock. If treatment services are the middle bit, wrapped around it is Lero, the Lero community. Both at the front end, it's not just aftercare, it's at the beginning. It's creating that visible opportunity for people to aspire to something. Sometimes in the UK, we talk about rehabilitation, but perhaps we need to talk about habilitation, because some people that used substances don't know anything different. We've got second and third generation families of addicts that don't know what it's like to live drug and alcohol free. And I deliberately use the word addict there as a provocative statement. And I think for me, Leros have such a power in terms of staying well, and it's been proven that if you associate with lived experience recovery groups, you've got far more chance of staying drug and alcohol free. So this is where we are at the moment in the UK. We've got Roscoe's recovery orientated systems of care. We're doing surveys at the minute and evidence-based. We've been involved in workforce analysis as well. But what we're doing is making sure that the best example and peer research, which Dave is part of, and we've got peer researchers going into both services and Leros to make sure that they validate what is the harnessing of the really good bits, and what is the evidence about good quality Leros, what makes that work. And we're feeding that back in, so that actually it validates the care that we're delivering, often for marginalized communities. This is another Lero up in the northeast. So this is Recovery Connections, and I know Monica will know this, in Dot's service. And what I loved about Dot's is the bike. Are we out of time, Isabel? So what is the bike, and it really breaks down social stigma. So when we've got people in recovery taking the bike out onto the streets, and meeting the community and having conversations, because often people have got prejudgments about it, and over a cup of coffee you can do amazing things about resetting people's views and opinions about people with addiction. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stuart and Dave, for this amazing presentation. For presenting on these lived experience recovery organizations, which is a remarkable asset-based community-based model that helps people in recovery so that they can stay well in their communities, which is so key to ensuring that they can sustain and live a healthy life. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing all of this great model with us. So if anyone has any questions, I just want to remind you that you can type it in the box, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So just type it in the box in the time being. I would like to now invite Colette Curlew, the Director of Client Services at the National Council on Drug Abuse in Jamaica, to present on utilizing an integrated approach for drug treatment court clients. And she's going to be sharing this experience in Jamaica. Colette, thank you so much for being with us here this morning. Welcome, and you have the floor.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. Good day, all. I greet you on behalf of our Executive Director, Mr. Michael Tucker, with one love from Jamaica. I would like to thank Isabella for inviting us to share our experiences of recovery and social integration of people with SUDs, and this on this prestigious platform and conference. Also want to thank Ambassador Nam for leading the charge, and Emana for facilitating the change and empowerment within the Caribbean, specifically to address demand reduction interventions and dialogues like this. To my fellow panelists and colleagues, I greet you. I'd like to thank Natalia as well, Nelson, who compiled this presentation. So before I forget, I'd like to tell her a big thank you. We can go ahead with the presentation. Thank you. So today we'll be looking at the drug treatment court specifically in Jamaica and how we use an integrative recovery model for that, or an approach rather. Thanks. Next slide, please. So at the National Council on Drug Abuse, you may be wondering, what do we do there? Well, the first thing we do is that we conduct and disseminate research on the prevalence and patterns of drug use. Because of this information, we are now able to develop and implement national evidence-based prevention and treatment programs, facilitate capacity among our service providers. That's another thing that we do, including the healthcare sector, law enforcement officers, and even among the school and civil society. We also use this information from our research to guide policymakers and key stakeholders and the public about what's happening within Jamaica and the world at large. And we collaborate with other government ministries, agencies, departments, NGOs, FBOs, CBOs to support our demand reduction interventions. We cannot do this alone at all. And also partner with like OACCAD and other international and regional agencies to implement these hemispheric and global policies and strategies into our national programming. So next slide, please. Thanks. So what is an integration recovery approach, you may ask? It is described as a comprehensive, balanced, multi-phase and multidisciplinary approach to the treatment of and recovery from addiction. That should be addiction. Our approach is multidisciplinary to better address the different healthcare and social needs simultaneously of our clients. So that's the clients that we service at National Council on Drug Abuse. And we're reminded by Bartram that recovery can also include improvements to other areas of life, such as stable housing, employment, mental health supports, or improved relationships. And that's why we try to facilitate that process and give them, our clients, the best chance at life by giving them a holistic care. And this approach is seen throughout our various service offerings. And for this presentation, we will focus on the drug treatment court program. But I must say that we do offer treatment to anybody that's referred to us or who will come to our offices or who will call us. We also do service the clients from child diversion, probation, from workplaces. Now we have a crime prevention plan, so we would see the clients that are referred from the communities and also from drug treatment court. And this has been in existence in Jamaica since 2001, and we'll be focusing on this. So we have 21 years of DTC in Jamaica. Next slide, please. So why this approach? NIDA tells us why, but I want to point out that acceptance of our clients as being more than a sum of all their parts is important. And at NCDA, we do focus on positive regard and respect for our clients, meeting them where they're at, collaborating with them for goals, for treatment goals as well. And we recognize that dealing with recovery in isolation minimizes long-term positive effects and results. So the impact, for better impact, it is critical that we do the holistic care as recommended by NIDA here too. So after your intake process, what is required for this client? So you look into all the services that they would need, and it's an individualized treatment plan depending on the needs of our clients. And sometimes it is child care services, sometimes it's vocational, sometimes it's mental health, medical services, educational. You know that sometimes the risk of HIV increases and other infectious diseases, so we need to make the referrals accordingly. There are legal services because some of them may come in conflict with the law. They may need financial services as well, and housing is a big family. And of course, the biggest support that they will have is the family. So we need to incorporate them in the treatment. So we look at the treatment plan with all of this in mind, and we do monitoring of their substance use. We refer them to self-help group as required. There's pharmacotherapy if required, continuum of care we look into, and we do it using a case care management approach. And some of the therapies that we use will be behavioral and cognitive behavioral as well. Next slide, please. So this is our pathway that happens when a client enters our system. We're going to do intake and comprehensive assessment based on the needs of the client. As I said, there's referral to other entities as needed, and we will start our counseling intervention if the client is stable. If they need mental health care, that will be done prior to the counseling intervention. And then based on, and it is continuous feedback and look back to look at what's happening, and then eventually, and adjust the treatment plan accordingly, and then eventually the client will be discharged. Next slide, please. And you see that it is, as we say, it's continuous. So we will look to see what else needs to be done. You can continue. All right, so what do we offer as well to support this at NCDA? We make sure that, and I heard Ambassador Nam mention it earlier, the standardized manuals. There's a protocol on how to care for our clients. What's that standards? And we have developed a national treatment standard. So this is what guides and it's based on evidence and best practices that we use and what the standards are internationally. We incorporate with that, and we have our treatment protocol as well. We have a treatment coordinator who is Natalia that I mentioned earlier. So what she does is oversee the efficiency, quality of care of these interventions. She does the training as well, and she provides the support that they need, including sometimes we have to do the case conferences, and anything that's new, we're going to teach them. And also we have a substance use information system, and she oversees this database. And this captures details of sessions, the clients, the case management activities, and also the tests that we will do. Any scores we have on that, that's uploaded there. And we also have an M&E team, and it's crucial in the overall monitoring of the agencies. So we want to know if we're on track with our goals. Are the clients progressing? Are they effective? Are they showing any results? And what are the opportunities that we can use to fix this? Any deficiencies in what we're doing. So we have 2 layers of monitoring to ensure that our standard is good. Next slide, please. As I said earlier, we're going to focus on the drug treatment courts. I'm going to give you a client as well and share our experience with him. And this is a joint venture between the Ministries of Justice, National Security, Health and Wellness, and the National Council on Drug Abuse. And it's a formal arrangement with an MOU with roles and responsibilities, and resources are allocated accordingly. We should know, but just in case, the drug treatment court applies the tenets of therapeutic jurisprudence by offering an alternative to incarceration. So what you do instead of punishing the client, they are referred to counseling because it is the next slide, please, that the drug use is right there before the court. And what the objectives are for drug court is to reduce the incidence of drug use and dependence by persons who have whose criminal activity are found to be linked to such dependence. So because of their drug use, they are now before the court. So they recognize that this person needs help, not punishment. And we have to applaud the team in Jamaica for, I would say, logging on to this and giving persons opportunities. And we know this was piloted in the US and Canada. It also reduces the level of criminal activity that results from drug abuse and produce such assistance to those persons as will enable them to function as law-abiding citizens. So the key, you can go ahead. So the key is that we want them to be fully reintegrated in society. So what are the pathways? So there are 3 phases, 3 steps that we're going to look at. The client is accepted into the program. An assessment is done by the probation and aftercare officer and the psychiatrist, and based on their recommendation, the persons will be participants in the drug court. And then now they have 3 phases that they have to go through, each with a minimum of 3 months. The National Council on Drug Abuse, Substance Abuse Officer or Council begins the treatment intervention. So you'll have individual, group, those are mandated sessions, and then family now, depending on the need. And we actually do case management. So we do the referrals based on the client's needs, as I mentioned earlier, because it's individualized according to each client's needs. And they graduate after successfully completing the phases, and they are adhering to the program activities. There's an aftercare plan that is developed and activated, and with ongoing referral as needed. And usually it's a big thing. We have a big ceremony in Jamaica where we graduate these persons. A lot of them, this is the first time they're ever graduating from anything. So this is a big deal for us. And we commend them and award them. So a lot of them will get a token to start their career path. So we also are looking closely at that and how they can be better off and how they can smooth the transition into their employment. Next slide, please. And of course, oversight is done by the DTC staff and the team for each court. We have 5 courts in Jamaica. So each court has a team that offers the coaching, the guidance, and they do the pre-court meetings together and discuss what's happening. And then there's an oversight for all of them, headed by puisne judge in Kingston. Next slide, please. So what are some of the activities that our treatment provider will provide? So you have the counseling intervention. We mentioned it earlier with individual, group, and family sessions. We facilitate primary healthcare access as well. So we're going to make that call. We're going to make that referral. We're going to follow up. We're going to do what we term warm handing over. So I think later on I'll talk a little bit about that. We're making referrals to rehab facilities because sometimes they need residential care. So we will do that, or detoxification. And absolutely, this consumes a lot of the time for a treatment provider, case management. We collaborate with the team as well as the psychiatrist to figure out what's best for the client, and would make the necessary referrals or changes in our treatment plan to facilitate what is required at that time, because it's continuously reviewed. We look at social integration activities. We want to get them back out there. We want to get them working. And we do the monitoring of their substance use, and we report all of this now to the judiciary and the DTC team that will have pre-court meetings. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about Leonard Skinner. That's not his name. It was changed. And this is a synopsis of what was done with him, who he is, and where he is now in terms of his recovery. So then Leonard is age 22. He lives with his mother and sisters. He has a 4-year-old child that he supports. He's a high school dropout, but literate and numerate. So I heard strength-based coming out earlier. So all of that is used when we're treating our clients. Based on his social evaluation report, it revealed increase in violent behavior in a man otherwise perceived as peaceful since he started smoking cannabis. And I apologize, I just realized I'm talking pretty fast and maybe too fast for the translator. So I'll try and slow down. I apologize. His family and community members have expressed concern. His offense, can you go back, please? The reason why he came to court was because of assault, occasionally bodily harm to the child's mother. Remember, we said he had a child rather. I didn't say a daughter. So he has a 4-year-old child that he supports. So it's a child, not a daughter. So he harmed the mother of that child. So that's why he's before the court. His drug of impact is cannabis, and he smokes 3 to 5 spliffs daily. He's a poly user because he's also using grabber, tobacco, and alcohol. The occupation that he has, he assisted with deliveries at an established company, but lost a job due to his offense. So he currently does odd jobs. Next slide, please. So in phase 1, he had 15 sessions. And what was done in that was a psychiatric assessment. And based on that, he was found to be fit for the program. And there were no other discovered mental health disorders that came out. Weekly court attendance were mandated, and he attended. Individual sessions are about 60 minutes and group 90, and they're done weekly. Harm reduction techniques are initially used as he felt he was unable to quit but was willing to try. Eventually, he began testing negative for cannabis on a regular basis. The DTC team found opportunity for him to work at a gas station, and for a few months, this contributed to his school expenses for his child. Unfortunately, this ended prematurely due to gang intimidation from a rival community. So we have to understand, in Jamaica, sometimes there are some borders that we cannot cross. So he had to leave that job. However, being registered at a clinic, he began to take advantage of the medical services, and he took the opportunity to do his dental care. Next slide, please. So the focus in our phase 1 here for him was the preparation for change. Remember, he came in, say he wasn't sure, but he would try. Then we came up with the individualized treatment plan for him. We identified his internal and external triggers, work on those, gave him the coping strategies and the refusal skills. We did substance use education on him, and we looked at education and employment assessment. Next slide, please. So phase 2 now, we're 18 sessions long. So he continued testing negatively for cannabis, and through engagement with an NGO, a non-government organization, the client, in addition to others in the program, were recommended and accepted into workforce empowerment and skills training program. And this helped tremendously. He went and tested for his driving exam and was successful, and the family assisted with the cost of that. So he got his driver's license. He was sponsored by an NGO, as we said, to enroll in an institution for auto mechanic training, which he wanted to do. And he had a brief substance use lapse, but came back on track. So it didn't last long. He had the skills he needed, was motivated enough, so he eventually came back on track. Next slide, please. So what was the focus in phase 2? Relapse prevention, refusal skills, handling stress and boredom, emotional intelligence, anger management, financial management, and focus on positive integration activities and effective communication skills. Next slide, please. In phase 3 now, and this was for 6 sessions, he was encouraged by DTC probation aftercare officer to attend camp where youth participants would learn how to create a simple business plan and pitch the idea for prizes. He won the pitch, and the funds enabled him to kickstart his mobile auto repairs business. He purchased a used car, repaired it, and slowly began to expand his clientele. So now he has successfully completed his training. With the support of his family and community, it was evident, and he started his preparation to exit the program. He graduated the program after 10 months, and he's currently working and still works in the auto repairs field with his own garage on the family premises. He has not had any negative encounter with law enforcement. Next slide, please. So the focus for him during this phase was goal setting, social support systems, post-social activity, giving back to the community. And what he did for this was participating in repainting of a school with his fellow group members. And we do encourage them all to give back. There's social reintegration that was worked on as well. He became employed. And so we focused a lot on that, and we prepared him for graduation and program discharge with an evaluation, and he conducted an exit interview as well. And of course, we initiated the aftercare plan, and we would have followed up with him with the next 3 to 6 months to ensure that all was on track. Next slide, please. So using social integration as a recovery initiative in this context, in Jamaica, we do not have a dedicated social worker role among the DTC team. The treatment provider plays a pivotal role in coordinating these activities and services, and also case management of the client. So there's a lot for them to carry and to bear. So some of the things that he got during this time with NCDA was he was able to get the documentation. So he didn't have a birth certificate, so we facilitated same with Registrar General and took him through that process to get his tax ID set up, his NIS card, National Insurance Scheme card, because you need a national insurance card or a number in order to get your tax ID. He got a national ID as well, and then eventually, as we heard, he got his driver's license. Some of the services he was able to access were treatment from the psychiatrist, the primary care referrals. You remember he went and looked about his dental care. He went to ATSU, Addiction Treatment Services Unit, and also Teen Challenge for rehabilitation. These are residential services. Addiction Treatment Services Unit is our detox unit at the University of the West Indies. And we're able to link him to other agencies for remedial education and also skills training, so he could graduate as an auto mechanic. Next slide. So what he did within the community, we saw evidence of this. He gave back as part of the discharge process. And we were able as well to sensitize other government ministries and departments, because what we find sometimes is that it's a revolving door. So judges come and they'll go, police officers who can make the recommendation for DTC, they come and they'll go as well. So we'll do sensitization sessions with those entities as well as social services. So that Ministry of Labor, we're about to sign an MOU with them to grant them, to give them grants so that they can start their small businesses. So we're building progress, we're building community for them. The family sessions help a lot. And we refer to the social services that the family can benefit from. So there's like the PATH program, that if they have someone in school, they can get them on the PATH program to pay them, to give them school fees and lunch, provide lunch and other resources that they may need to go back to school. So there are social services that can be provided for the family members, and we make that referral as well. We do advocacy to assist with the self-employment endeavors, and that's done through the social services and other NGOs as well. And we assist with the preparation for work, resume and creation, and the skills that he will need for the workforce or any other client. Next slide, please. What can we say that is key? The treatment provider in this context in Jamaica Land We Love is at the center of facilitating and providing direct counseling intervention. We also said the case management and the social integration, all of those services that's required, they help with that. However, the client benefits from a range of services that we do not offer and cannot give. So the provision of these services can directly impact the long-term success of the intervention after the client has graduated. And we depend on a lot of these NGOs and government agencies to make this possible and to guarantee that it happens. Social reintegration activities is conducted with a judicial oversight because this is a charge that was brought before the court, so they manage the entire process. The timeline we have to recognize requires flexibility to account for relapses, and also where the client is at. Are they ready to change, not to change? Are they progressing as you'd want them to or not? So we have to be flexible. We have to meet the clients where they're at. They're the experts in their field, and we have to go at their pace. We also rely on building strong relationships and linkages with other organizations, and it's critical to as we say, we need these services to ensure that after graduation it is sustained, their sobriety is sustained, and they can be fully reintegrated into society. And also the warm referrals and handoffs from our services to another service provider makes a big difference. And so, as we say, it's critical to have those strong relationships. So we'll call and say, can you facilitate, let me say, Teen Challenge. I'll call and say, can you facilitate one of my persons? His family does or doesn't have the money, and it's always a yes. Addiction Treatment Services Unit is a similar thing. So we need to have those strong relationships so we can do the warm referrals and handoffs, because our clients will need it to sustain their sobriety and to be better able to facilitate reintegration and the lasting impact of same in society. Next slide. I think that is it for my presentation. I thank you very much for affording me this opportunity, and Natalia for helping with the preparation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colette, for presenting on this integrated recovery model that recognizes that recovery cannot be dealt with in isolation if we want to maximize the long-term positive results for those individuals in conflict with the law and facing substance use disorders. This example and this case study provided made it very clear to us to understand how the process works in Jamaica. So I want to congratulate you on this amazing work, and also thank you for sharing this model here with us today. So if anyone has questions for Colette, just reminding you that you can use the chat box to type in your questions, and then we're going to address them at the end. I would like to invite now Monica Barzanti, Head of International Relations at San Patrignano, Italy. She will be presenting today on recovery and stigma, the experience of San Patrignano. Monica, good afternoon to you. Welcome to this webinar, and you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Isabella. And now I'm pleased to share with you the 44 years long experience of San Patrignano about recovery, and elaborate a bit more on how stigma can impact on recovery. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, this is not the first slide. Okay, can you see it? Perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And
let me check if the audio, my audio is correct? Is original yes. Audio? Yeah, okay. So we all know that stigma has a strong impact on recovery, because substance use disorder is ranked first among the most stigmatized condition. But it is composed of 4 dimensions. I mean, stigma, it consists of blame. People blame people who use drugs because they think that it's their own fault that they use drugs. There is a negative prognosis, meaning that people have a negative perception about the possibility of recovery. And also the social dangerousness of people with substance use disorder are perceived as sometimes might be violent, a threat to me and to others. So this perception is very strong and cause the stigma. The consequence of these three dimensions of stigma is the social distance. People with substance use disorder are kept at the margin of society, and they have barriers to housing, employment, access to education, care, services. So they are at the margin and remain at the margin, and more they are marginalized. Also, the families of people with substance use disorder are stigmatized. They are blamed for their loved one condition, and they feel also isolated and helpless. Another consequence, important consequence of stigma is self-stigma. People start to be aware of the stigma, of the public stigma on them. Then they agree on these negative public stereotypes on them, and they apply to themselves these stereotypes. The end of this process is harm, because people have a significant decrease in their self-esteem and self-efficacy that might lead them to not even try to access treatment because they do not trust they will succeed. And this is a very negative condition. My colleague and friend Stuart mentioned CHIME as the 5 elements that are so important for recovery. And stigma and self-stigma are so much, have a great impact on this 5 dimensions. The connection are cancelled by discrimination and self-isolation. Hope doesn't exist anymore because negative prognosis and negative thoughts about future are present in everyday life. Also, the identity is become one with the negative identity attributed by people to those who use drugs. People feel their life as useless, meaningless, and so they find no meaning, no goals in life. In addition, the low self-esteem and self-efficacy make people feel without any power on their life. So all these conditions, stigma and self-stigma, affect very powerfully the capacity of people to access and to have a hope in recovery. One of the ways in which people, let's say, scientific community try to decrease and to address stigma is say that substance use disorder is a brain disease, a chronic and relapsing brain disease. And according to a study made by Professor Kelly of the Harvard Medical School, he found out that this approach reduced blame because people, okay, it's not your fault, it's a disease, but this doesn't affect, on the contrary, it increases the social distance, the dangerousness, and the prognostic pessimism. So it is not a good way to address stigma. Probably it is something that accounts for only a part of the problem, but it doesn't address the whole complexity. Also, Professor David Best, in his article, Challenging the Brain Disease Model of Addiction, underlined that evidence suggests that brain disease model of addiction has only furthered the stigma associated with addiction, leaving addicts increasingly vulnerable to exclusion and marginalization. So what I would like to conclude is that this brain disease model of addiction do not help reducing stigma. So what can we do? One important thing is to use a different terminology. My colleague Stuart very clearly explained which terminology is better, is more appropriate. It is important to increase the number of services and to improve their quality in line with the international quality standard defined by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, as said by Ambassador Nam. And it's important to make people know that people in recovery can be trustable, can be full of potential, that they only need to rediscover and express. So expose people, the general population, to people in recovery might be very important to reduce stigma. At San Patrignano, what we always applied since the very beginning is a vision on people with substance use disorder. We focused not on their weakness, not on their mistakes, but on their strength, and try to help them to develop this strength. This is San Patrignano today, but in the 80s, at the beginning of 80s, it was like that, with mobile houses donated after an earthquake. The main feature at that time was peer support, and it is still the main characteristic of our method. The main principle is based mainly on the fact that people with substance use disorder are not patients. We think that drug users, people who use drugs, are unique, special individuals, and they need to rediscover this potential and learn to express it. In the 70s, also in Italy, stigma was very strong. People with substance use disorder were considered weak with a moral failure. Nowadays, around the world, this brain disease model, but none of these analyses account for the complexity of the issue. The speakers that were before me very clearly expressed the idea of how complex and how many concause as this issue. So how it is important to address the high complexity of the problem. San Patrignano is based on peer education, as I said, solidarity, volunteering, mutual, and self-help. And I have to say that most of the staff components are former residents of the community that take advantage of their personal experience with addiction and also completed this personal experience with ad hoc studies as educator, psychologist, or a social worker, or in a field that could be of some help, completed by their own personal experience. The residential treatment is free of charge for the resident and the family, because we think that this idea of providing, each one provide to one's need, as an important and powerful educative value, and can enhance self-confidence and self-esteem in people. If I think that I am in treatment and someone pay for me, I don't feel that much responsible for my own work, for what I do every day. If I think that I am working for myself and I have to count on my contribution to help myself and all my colleagues, my mate, along the pathways, this helps to increase self-esteem a lot. Also, at the beginning of our story at San Patrignano, early 80s, we addressed the stigma of families, and we helped many families to create self-help groups, mutual self-help groups of family all over Italy. This group of families not only helped each other, but also helped other people to motivate their loved one to start a recovery process. Families stepped out from the shadow and started to not to be ashamed any longer for their condition, but on the contrary, started to ask for help openly without being ashamed any longer. Nowadays, we have 42 independent parents organizations that work together and help many other families and other residents and people who needs help to enter the community. There are many elements that are important to empower people and to challenge stigma. So power, access to resources, being given option, help them to have a positive thinking about the future, learning new skills, have a goal, increase, improve their self-image, so find a new identity and grow also, because we have also very young people, and also the elder has to grow in their own personality as an adult and have some spiritual and moral values that are not moralistic, but moral values, honesty and solidarity. So in concrete, which are the 3 pillars for the recovery at San Patrignano? The first one is social interaction. In this interaction, interpersonal relationship, people are capable of recreate and rebuild reciprocal trust, learn to be accountable for other individuals, for society, so that they gain new skill and self-confidence for their future life. Then this is the moment in which they can access to vocational training opportunity, meaningful activity for their spare time, so that they can learn to spend their talents in something that can give them reward, that can retrain their brain to be rewarded by meaningful activity and meaningful job, cultural, volunteering activity, all of that increase self-esteem and favor the social integration that will come at the end of the process. After the first year, in which we were not aware of the fact that probably some people had previous mental health issues that were precedent substance use disorder, we added also trauma-informed approach, supporting people also with psychotherapy, psychological support, and in some cases, when necessary, also with psychiatric treatment. So we can say that, that most of our program is based on educational program, and the substance use disorder is addressed with these tools. But people have many occasions previous trauma that need to be treated, or it might cause relapse. So we provide them with individual psychotherapy for 35% of people, and also a 20% that need some sort of pharmacological treatment to address obsessive compulsive disorder or some emotional trauma connected to sexual abuse in childhood. I have to say that 30% and more of 30% of our girls has been abused in her childhood. Important elements that our people share is a low level of formal education. As you can see in this slide, the vast percentage, the most of our people has only get the middle school diploma. A small number access at high school, and only a few have a university degree. Also, the employment status is incredible. I mean, most of the people do not have any employment before entering the community. So these two information gave us an input to offer people formal education and vocational training. After a first period of vocational guidance in which we help people to understand what they want to do in their life, what are their talents, their aspiration, their goal, what they would like to, how they would like to complete their treatment for recovery, so they can access formal education or vocational training or both. A number of them can also access to paid traineeship. Not all of them, because we do not have this possibility, but we have some donors that can fund some paid traineeship for a number of people so that they can work within the community, being paid for their work, and then have a small amount of money for the final social reintegration. Of course, we offer this opportunity to those who have less economic and social resources outside the community at the end of their residential treatment. This is our study center. We have had around 2,000 students since 1989. And these are the number of courses that we were able to offer to our people. In 2020, because COVID was hit very hard, we were able to offer only 7 different courses. Then in 2021, when COVID was a bit less, not such an emergency, we were able to offer this opportunity and for 16 different courses. And the same for the paid traineeship, 45 people in 2020 and 55 people were given this opportunity in 2021. Here you can see some photo of some of the training opportunities people have. They can do at the bottom right, dog educator, they train dog, and our dog kennel is also a shelter for abandoned and maltreated dog, and we can educate, rehabilitate them so that we can give them in adoption. So it is a sort of give back in a different way to dogs that have suffered a lot from violent owners. And there is the wood carpentry, cheese making factory, bakery, hairstylist, vineyards, and people learn agriculture and how to treat vineyards, textile workshop, graphic arts, and more. Here I would like to draw your attention of the percentage in green of people that leave the community without having already an employment. Only 15%, I think, in 2019, while in 2020, because of COVID, this percentage increased a lot. But most of the people, as you can see here, have a job in the area in which they were trained within the community. And we every year assess and check the labor market in order to identify the course and the opportunity to offer, in order to be able to offer our people the best opportunity to reintegrate and to have a job. Because it is important to have a job, to feel useful to society, to feel part of society, is an element that is of fundamental value. Some of our outcomes, you can see the success rate is around 72%, measured by independent institution follow-up research in 1995 and 2005. We also welcome people coming in alternative to jail, and we changed more than 4,000 years of jail into rehabilitation program. Recently, also with the support of the Italian government, we totally eradicated HCV, hepatitis C, from our people, from our residents. 85 to 90%, as I told you, leave the community with a job, mostly in the field in which they were trained within the program. the length of stay is quite long, something that is not very familiar for you maybe, but it is around 3 years. But the reason is that we included into a single process all what Colette explained as an integrated approach. So not only, not many different agencies and stakeholders that collaborate together, but the community take care of all the process in order to avoid any dropout and to help the people to complete their program and go back to society as contributing member of it. The community is a social enterprise. We produce cheese, cold cut, bakery products, and with this revenue, we can provide to the 65–70% of our needs. The rest come from donation. And this is the social, the how can I say, the structure of the community, which is composed of 4 entities, 2 social cooperative and 2 associations that take care of the education on one side and of the sport and leisure time activity on the other side, while the 2 cooperatives support the reintegration activity and all the courses. What we wanted to do a few years ago is to measure our social return of investment, to understand if this program, which is 3 years long, is as a cost benefit. I mean, how much does it cost? Is it convenient for society to invest in this kind of treatment? This is one important thing that also Stu analyzed, because addiction has a huge cost for society. Is it worth investing in recovery? And we discovered with this calculation that it is really worth investing in recovery. What is social return on investment? I don't know who is familiar with this evaluation, but it's a framework that utilizes monetary values to represent social and environmental outcomes. So we identify 3 proxies in order to be able to measure our social return of investment. And then after having established the impact in these financial proxies, we make a ratio between input, donation received, and the value generated. So we discovered that San Patrignano returned to society 5.13 euros per you need a point for each euro received. What we calculated? We calculated the gain coming from the job training of our people. Our people go back to society, work, have a job, pay taxes. And so this monetary value can be calculated quite easily. Also, the reduction of cost from drug addiction, which means how much each people can cost to the national health system when it is assistance for her substance use disorder. Another proxy that we used was the reduction of cost from criminality. So putting together all this and in a ratio with the donation that we received in the same year, we obtained this number, 5.13 euros per each euros donated. You can find some reference that I found very interesting, the impact of self-stigma, and so many other references. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Monica, for joining us here today and for presenting on this very important topic of recovery and stigma, and for sharing the experience of San Patrignano. As Ambassador Nam mentioned in his opening remarks, this issue is still very prevalent in our region, as it is in most parts of the world. So this experience of San Patrignano is very relevant and important for expanding the discussion on this topic. So thank you again for sharing this experience of what can be done to challenge stigma and self-stigma and to promote personal empowerment of people in recovery. Reminding everybody, if you have any questions for Monica, please type it in the box. I'm going to invite now our last panelist of today, Daniela Nieto. She is the Deputy Head of Social Integration Area
Hola.
at the Service for Prevention and Rehabilitation of Drug and Alcohol Use in Chile. She will be presenting on social integration and recovery model, the Chilean experience. Daniela, welcome to our webinar. Good morning, and you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Agradezco muchísimo la invitación de poder estar hoy día presentándoles un poco del modelo que ha surgido desde el Servicio Nacional para la Prevención y Rehabilitación de Drogas de Chile. Por tanto, primero como contextualizar que lo que hoy día voy a presentar más bien es una estructura, una oferta programática, la disponibilidad de servicios que tenemos frente al tema de la integración social en el que seguimos avanzando hacia la recuperación. Voy a compartir mi pantalla. Bueno, como les decía, hoy día voy a presentar entonces la oferta que tiene el servicio en materia de integración social y recuperación. Para eso me parece súper importante poder hacer énfasis y contextualizar entonces de dónde y cómo se aloja la oferta disponible, ¿no? Y por tanto hacer una descripción sobre Senda y su oferta programática en general. Luego concentrarme en todos los aspectos y los pilares teóricos que fundamentan un poco las acciones y la toma de decisiones en el diseño de la política pública. Luego mostrarles un...
Perdón, Daniela, yo te voy a pedir para hablar un poquito más despacio por el tema de la interpretación.
Ah, ok, sí.
Sí,
Capaz que le
gracias.
bajo.
Un poquito más despacio.
¿Ahí?
No, te escuchamos bien, es solo que para hablar un poco más despacio.
Ah, más lento.
Sí, más lento.
Ok.
Gracias.
Sí. Eso me pasa, que cuando me emociono voy muy rápido. Bueno, como les decía, la idea es entonces ir como de los aspectos más generales a los particulares, por tanto, contextualizar un poco lo que hace el servicio y la disponibilidad que tiene de oferta programática, para luego ir centrándonos un poco en los aspectos teóricos que fueron fundamentales para el diseño de los programas de integración social. Luego concentrarnos entonces en toda la oferta programática específica que tiene el área e ir mostrándoles un poco la trayectoria en el ejercicio de la implementación que ha ido avanzando este modelo de integración social hacia la disponibilidad de servicios que puedan prestar entonces oferta en apoyo a los procesos de recuperación. El Servicio Nacional para la Prevención y Rehabilitación de Drogas y Alcohol es un organismo dependiente del Ministerio del Interior del Gobierno de Chile, y en su misión tiene como por objetivo ser responsable de elaborar y ejecutar las políticas de prevención en el consumo de drogas y alcohol, así como ejecutar las políticas en materia de tratamiento y rehabilitación e integración social. Además, está a cargo de desarrollar la Estrategia Nacional de Drogas y Alcohol. La actual es del año 2021 hasta el 2030, por tanto, es la política de drogas que está vigente. ¿Cuál es la disponibilidad de servicios que el Senda tiene? Es, bueno, todo lo que tiene que ver con la oferta de prevención y promoción, la oferta de tolerancia cero y contacto ciudadano, que está alojada más bien en los territorios más locales, más comunales, tratamiento y rehabilitación, integración social, la Academia Senda, que tiene todo que ver lleva más bien el desarrollo de la generación de la disponibilidad de capacitaciones y formación a distintos actores, sociedad civil, instituciones con las que nosotros estamos trabajando, ejecutores de nuestros programas y, bueno, los colaboradores también. Y el Observatorio de Drogas, quienes son el área o la unidad que genera toda la producción de conocimiento. Hace muchos años generan la encuesta nacional de drogas a población general y a población adolescente, de la que en algún minuto yo también les haré mención a propósito de poder sustentar un poco de los diseños en base a algunas preguntas y la evidencia que podemos recoger a partir de estos estudios. Me parece muy importante hacer una primera revisión sobre qué se dice cuando nosotros hablamos de integración social. Y hay algo que no quiero como quebrar un poco la tendencia. Nosotras siempre cuando hacemos presentaciones, siempre comenzamos con 3 preguntas disparadoras. Y estas preguntas son, ¿qué es lo que queremos? ¿Por qué queremos? ¿Y cómo queremos? ¿No? ¿Y qué es lo que queremos? Efectivamente nosotros queremos la recuperación. Por tanto, el propósito y el sentido de la oferta en materia de integración social va ligada más bien a lograr la abstinencia o la variación del patrón de consumo de las personas que están hoy en los programas de tratamiento. Y cuando nos referimos a la pregunta de ¿por qué? Es porque en el fondo nosotros nos partimos de la base de que las drogas empobrecen, dañan y desvinculan, ¿ya? Y que por tanto el consumo de sustancias podría ser una causa y una consecuencia de la exclusión social. Y como causa nos referimos a que en el fondo el consumo de alcohol y de drogas puede provocar un deterioro importante de las condiciones de vida de las personas, pero a la vez, como consecuencia, a propósito de procesos de marginalidad social que afectan a las personas que están con problemas de adicciones. Por tanto, el modelo o la forma en la que nosotros esperamos trabajar y diseñamos nuestra oferta programática tiene que ver con un modelo de integración social que responde al cómo, ¿no? Esto de generar, por un lado, entonces, el trabajo con la persona afectada, pero a la vez también con la sociedad y las comunidades. Por tanto, es un proceso de acomodación mutua, bilateral, ¿no? En el que supone la contribución de las personas en un proceso sinérgico con las comunidades para la equiparación de oportunidades, que permitan la igualdad a través del ejercicio de los derechos, ¿no? Y la participación en los diferentes espacios sociales. Otro de los elementos importantes que subyace al concepto de integración social tiene que ver con que, como es un modelo que refuerza la acomodación mutua, ¿no? Lo importante también es reconocer justamente esas diferencias, esas trayectorias tan personales e individuales, ¿no? Y por tanto, esas biografías, esas trayectorias, para que las sociedades entonces se abran a la posibilidad de incluir a través de la aceptación de esas diferencias, por tanto, en un proceso de reconocimiento de esas diferencias y no por asimilación. Cuando hablamos de recuperación, nosotros nos referimos al concepto o consideramos el concepto de SAMHSA, que tiene que ver más bien como está ligado a la recuperación natural, por tanto, lo que esperamos y es el propósito y el sentido también por el que trabajamos es que las personas que están hoy en procesos de tratamiento logren la abstinencia o una variación de su patrón de consumo, mejorando su salud, su bienestar y su calidad de vida. Y por tanto, eso implica que los logros alcanzados en el tratamiento puedan sostenerse una vez que las personas egresen de los programas, ¿no? Y esto también, entonces, trae consigo Otros referentes que son muy importantes para nosotros, que tienen que ver con el ejercicio de la ciudadanía, la promoción de derechos, efectivamente se materializa cuando las personas pueden participar activamente de las diferentes esferas productivas de la sociedad, ¿no? Y por tanto también hay un rol del Estado muy importante en poder generar esas condiciones para que las personas puedan integrarse, ¿no? Hemos podido escuchar en diferentes presentaciones de las personas y los compañeros que han expuesto anteriormente sobre cómo el estigma, el imaginario social, los prejuicios son barreras de acceso, y eso también está a la base del desarrollo de esta experiencia y de este modelo de trabajo. Me parece muy relevante también como poder contarles que dentro de los marcos teóricos o los pilares conceptuales en los que nosotros basamos el diseño de los programas, queremos mostrar al menos 3 elementos que para nosotros son fundamentales. El primero, que tiene que ver como con la recuperación, ¿no? Y los capitales o recursos o activos para la recuperación, que están en diferentes niveles, ¿no? Y tiene que ver con, en el fondo, la amplitud y profundidad de estos recursos que todas las personas tienen y que van a servir, ¿no?, de base para transitar en este proceso y en esta trayectoria o proceso de cambio hacia la recuperación. Por tanto, al igual que lo mencionaba en la exponente de San Patriniano, me parece muy importante también hacer la mirada y la distinción de concentrarse en esos elementos que son promotores, ¿no? En esos recursos, y no en las carencias, no en las necesidades, no en las debilidades, sino más bien en todos los factores que, a propósito de poder tener tratamiento, necesitaríamos fortalecer, ¿no? El otro elemento importante tiene que ver con el modelo del marco de gestión para la recuperación sustentable. Esto tiene que ver con la sostenibilidad de los logros, ¿no? Y implica un poco en la línea de que los tratamientos también tienen que ser integrales, flexibles, anidados en el tiempo, considerando las diferentes biografías de los participantes, ¿no? Por tanto, la disponibilidad de servicios no solo debe concentrarse cuando las personas están en tratamiento, sino en un momento posterior, en paralelo, ¿no? La idea es que haya como una continuidad de oferta que posibilite entonces a las personas poder moverse y transitar y avanzar, ¿no?, en este proceso. El rol del Estado, por tanto, es fundamental, el rol de las comunidades y las sociedades también, para tejer este entramado que le dé soporte y posibilidades efectivas para lograr y mantener entonces el proceso de cambio. Y otro elemento que es importante tiene que ver con el ejercicio de la ciudadanía, y esto también está ligado un poco a lo que mencionaba en la lámina anterior, de cómo las drogas finalmente empobrecen y dañan y desvinculan, ¿no? Y por tanto, como consecuencia de procesos de marginalización, esto no solo tiene que ver con fortalecer las competencias más personales de las personas que están ahí, sino también de reconocer que existen profundas desigualdades que pueden ser disparadores o factores de riesgo justamente, y por tanto es necesario que para el avance o disminuir, por tanto, las tasas de reincidencia a los programas de tratamiento, es muy importante que las personas puedan ejercer los plenos derechos y tener responsabilidades también, y por tanto, en poder acceder a empleos, a viviendas, ¿no?, que les permitan de alguna manera fortalecer condiciones materiales que son muy importantes para la superación del problema. Bueno, y luego de todas esas referencias teóricas, lo que se materializa hoy se implementa en la experiencia chilena tiene que ver con un programa que en el 2012 y 2013 se diseña, y se llama Chile Integra, y que se reformula a propósito de algunos cambios y de elementos que nos parecían importantes para poder actualizar el programa, en un programa llamado Integración Social para Personas Adultas en Tratamiento. ¿Y por qué poner el acento en personas adultas? Porque básicamente en otras poblaciones, como por ejemplo población adolescente o jóvenes, población en situación de calle, e incluso población en libertad vigilada, tienen una oferta por parte del Estado específica en materia de integración social. No obstante, las personas adultas que están en los programas de tratamiento a propósito de su ciclo vital, no tienen como sistemas que les permitan, de alguna manera, por parte del Estado, ¿no? Ir avanzando en acciones de promoción y de reconocimiento frente a la equiparación de oportunidades. Por tanto, nos parece importante o no, comenzar ahí y poner el foco en este tipo de población. Y la implementación, entonces, del programa se da en 5 regiones del país, ¿no? En el extremo norte, en la región de Tarapacá, luego en la zona centro, en la región de Valparaíso, y en la región metropolitana, en el sur, en Biobío, y más al sur, en la región de Los Ríos. A pesar de estar en 5 regiones del país, esto implica poder llegar a más del 75% de las personas que están en los programas hoy de tratamiento, considerando en el fondo que las regiones de Valparaíso, la región metropolitana y Biobío concentran y son las regiones más grandes del país. Es muy importante compartir con ustedes que, bueno, que el diseño de este programa está a la base también como de la evidencia disponible, de muchos estudios que nosotros hicimos durante el 2011, el 2012 y el 2013, y dentro del 2011 desarrollamos un estudio que fue vital para finalmente el diseño de cada una de estas estrategias o componentes que ven más abajo con estos iconos, que de alguna manera nos permitió poder elaborar y construir una propuesta que atendiera a un perfil en específico, ¿no? Este estudio en el 2011 estuvo a cargo de una importante universidad del país, en la que se construyeron perfiles de integración social en las personas usuarias de tratamiento. Y estos perfiles, a través de la aplicación de un instrumento cualitativo, logró identificar que efectivamente había necesidades concretas para la integración social y la recuperación de las personas que estaban en los programas de tratamiento. Necesidades específicas en vivienda, porque un porcentaje muy importante de las personas que estaban en los programas de tratamiento ingresaban en condiciones de allegado, es decir, viviendo y compartiendo viviendas con otras personas, en las que entonces, por tanto, habían como hogares, diferentes hogares dentro de una vivienda, ¿no? Provoca hacinamiento, falta de intimidad, ¿no? Luego también estos perfiles lograron evidenciar que había mucha precariedad laboral en las personas que estaban en los programas de tratamiento, y una precariedad laboral que tiene que ver también con muy bajos niveles de escolaridad y de educación formal. Por otra parte, otro de los elementos que fueron disparadores de poner el acento en torno a la oferta y la disponibilidad de servicios tiene que ver con algo muy importante, que fue que a pesar de que estas personas que estaban en los programas de tratamiento podían estar dentro de los quintiles más bajos de la población, es decir, tener dificultad, estar dentro de una población muy amplia de personas que están en la línea de la pobreza, ¿no? De la marginalidad, y que eran posiblemente beneficiarios o sujetos activos de la política pública, no se reconocían como tal. Por tanto, no reconocían que podían ser o ir a solicitar algún programa o programa social por parte de la municipalidad o el Estado en materia de integración social. Estaban muy alejados de las políticas públicas y por tanto de la oferta pública. Y por otro lado, habían una precariedad también en las habilidades más sociales y prosociales de la población con la que estaba en tratamiento. Entonces, frente a este perfil de persona usuaria, ¿no? Nosotros, ¿qué es lo que hacemos? Es establecer una oferta programática específica que apuntara y diera entonces una satisfacción hacia a esas necesidades. Por tanto, se crea un programa de viviendas de apoyo a la integración social, viviendas que están en estas 5 regiones, en las que pueden participar todas las personas que egresan de los programas de tratamiento por alta terapéutica y tienen la intención de, bueno, primero que tienen las necesidades de poder tener un techo, una casa segura, que les permita entonces ir avanzando en un proceso de cambio, en un proceso de autonomía, ¿no? Y acá hay un equipo que entrena esas habilidades, que construye un plan de trabajo en relación ahora a elementos más de la vida misma, como del desarrollo y el desenvolvimiento de la vida misma. Por tanto, si tienen hijos, en relación al vínculo con los hijos y las responsabilidades que conlleva tener hijos, ¿no? Eh, en términos también laborales, en el ejercicio de la ciudadanía, en temas de atención financiera, en apoyo emocional, etc. Por otro lado, hay otro programa que se llama Orientación Sociolaboral, que está anidado en el marco del proceso terapéutico, ¿ya? Si bien las viviendas son para un grupo que egresó ya de los programas, la OSL es un dispositivo que permite a las personas que están en los procesos terapéuticos complementar intervenciones más en la línea de la integración social, ¿no? Y tiene que ver con con el fortalecimiento de las habilidades sociolaborales que permitan a las personas ser más atractivas al mercado laboral, ¿no? Y esto tiene como diferentes ámbitos de trabajo, ¿no? Hay ámbitos en la línea más personal, fortalecimiento de competencias más personales, en el ámbito social y también específicamente en la línea más laboral. Y acá hay un equipo de preparadores laborales que construye también un itinerario específico de trabajo en el plano laboral y que en algunos casos propicia la colocación laboral en puestos de trabajo en específico, ¿no? Entonces promueven, por ejemplo, el desarrollo de empleo independientes y dependientes, ¿no? Sabiendo por sobre todo que a propósito también como de la baja escolaridad, los niveles de educación que tienen las personas que hoy están en los programas, es que se requieren de elementos que puedan promover el desarrollo de mejores habilidades y de currículum muchísimo más fortalecidos en eso, para que puedan acceder a empleos menos precarios. Hay otro componente que tiene que ver con la vinculación con la oferta local, y en ese sentido nosotros tenemos gestores de integración social que hacen una suerte como de puente entre la oferta local que existen en los territorios o en las comunidades o en los municipios, en el caso chileno, ¿no? Con las necesidades que están hoy de las personas que están en los procesos terapéuticos, ¿no? Entonces ellos lo que hacen es sensibilizar la oferta pública, sensibilizar a los actores y a las comunidades, y entonces hacer este vínculo entre necesidades específicas con lo que existe hoy en los territorios. Y finalmente tenemos no un programa, sino una herramienta metodológica, que también es una herramienta complementaria a los equipos de tratamiento, que es la habilitación en competencias de integración social. Esto es una herramienta llamada SIAM, porque su sigla lo que de alguna manera resume son el fortalecimiento de competencias en la línea de la comunicación, por eso está la C, iniciativa, de I, manejo de autonomía, manejo y autonomía, ¿no? Por eso es SIAM. Y acá lo que se desarrollan son talleres grupales en los que las personas, los terapeutas, elaboran a través de una puesta de talleres específicos muy estructurados, con un proceso de inicio, el desarrollo de una actividad, con preguntas disparadoras y con un cierre, ¿no? Eso en resumidas cuentas es entonces la respuesta programática en integración social que se materializa en un programa de integración social para personas adultas y que Entonces, por un tema de viabilidad también, se trabaja sobre las personas que están a partir de 4 meses o más en los programas de tratamiento y que son diagnosticadas para levantar como criterios de focalización a través de una herramienta que se llama Diagnóstico Globales de Necesidades de Integración Social, que fue un diagnóstico que se creó justamente a partir de este estudio que yo les mencionaba del 2011 en la construcción de los perfiles de integración social. Esta lámina lo que les quiere mostrar en el fondo tiene que ver con algo que yo les hacía mención en el modelo teórico, de poder disponer de servicios que reconozcan las diversidades de las poblaciones, de las personas, y que a la vez estén también considerándose, o que la oferta esté disponible no solo en el tratamiento, sino que en un periodo posterior, ¿no? Entonces, tenemos acá las personas que ingresan a tratamiento, ¿ya? Por esta línea está todas las acciones que involucran a la oferta en tratamiento, y por este lado están las acciones que involucran a integración social, ¿ya? Las personas ingresan a los programas de tratamiento y hay una primera etapa, que es la evaluación inicial, que se compone de diferentes subetapas, ¿no? Los equipos eh, como inician el tratamiento es a través de sesiones que en el fondo vienen a fortalecer el vínculo terapéutico, pero a la vez a conocer a las personas, a conocer esas biografías, a conocer esos recursos, ¿no? Y elaboran entonces construyen o levantan a través de diferentes instrumentos un diagnóstico integral. Es decir, levantar esas necesidades, esos recursos, y empezar a estructurarlo para que de alguna manera dé pie para la construcción de un plan de tratamiento individualizado, ¿no? Por tanto, entre el PTI, que es la construcción de este plan de tratamiento individualizado, y el diagnóstico integral, debe haber mucha coherencia. Desde el marco de las acciones de integración social, hay un diagnóstico, como les mencionaba, de necesidades de integración social, que está elaborado a partir del modelo de los capitales de recuperación. Por tanto, lo que se levanta también es la relación de esta persona en relación a un capital físico, un capital social, el capital humano, ¿no? Y permite entonces también poder ampliar el panorama, ¿no? No tan sanitario, sino sociosanitario, de los elementos que son importantes de considerar en los procesos terapéuticos. Luego de esa etapa, ¿no?, que es la evaluación inicial, se da comienzo como al proceso que tiene que ver como con las intervenciones, y en esas intervenciones, ¿no?, se pueden aplicar, hay disponibilidad de servicios y una oferta muy variada, ¿no? Está la ejecución del PTI, por tanto, y de la evaluación continua de ese plan de tratamiento, ¿no?, en base a los objetivos que se propuso el participante o la participante, el feedback que le puede dar el preparador o el profesional del programa. Se levantan también una serie de necesidades de integración social que de alguna manera viene a ayudarle o facilitarle el trabajo con otros a los equipos de tratamiento, ¿no? Y pone el acento más bien no en un diagnóstico, sino en una acción en particular que orienta entonces la articulación con una oferta en específico. Por ejemplo, en materia de necesidades del ámbito judicial, uno podría levantar si efectivamente las personas tienen necesidades de trabajar o abordar temas con conflicto con la ley, o a lo mejor acercarse a tribunales de familia, en el caso que tengan hijos y quieran entonces ser responsables de los cuidados de los hijos, retomar la relación con los hijos, o en alguna medida también cuando, por ejemplo, están demandados por pensión alimenticia, ¿no? De alguna manera viene a orientar el trabajo que no es estrictamente de abordaje en el centro, sino que con otros, ¿no?, y que son muy importantes para el proceso de recuperación. Está también la vinculación a las redes, en el fondo, por ejemplo, en el caso chileno, actualizar el registro social de hogares, que tiene que ver como con un instrumento que es muy vital para ser beneficiario o sujeto de alguna política pública. eh, y se desarrollan también todo lo que tiene que ver con los talleres del CIAM, y en esta etapa también está la posibilidad de que las personas que están recibiendo intervenciones en el marco del proceso de tratamiento puedan entonces, quienes quieren fortalecer las habilidades laborales, ingresar a los programas de OSL. Y entonces cuando las personas egresan de los programas de tratamiento por alta terapéutica, desde las acciones de tratamiento se generan en diferentes instancias o acciones de seguimiento. Y en paralelo también está la posibilidad de que quienes quisieran continuar de alguna manera sosteniendo algunos logros, porque todavía requieren el apoyo de un equipo, pero no centrado en una atención sanitaria, sino más bien hacia como la sostenibilidad, el trabajo en la integración social y la promoción de la autonomía, y que no cuentan con un soporte habitacional, puedan participar de las PAS, ¿no? Algo importante que quedó en el tintero de la lámina anterior es que las viviendas de apoyo a la integración social son viviendas para hombres y para mujeres, y en el caso de las mujeres hacemos la distinción como con el enfoque de género, esto de poder dar la posibilidad también de que en estos procesos puedan participar mujeres con hijos, ¿no? Y por tanto en las viviendas hay familias que viven ahí, mujeres con sus hijos, ¿no? Y son en algunos sentidos las primeras experiencias en el maternaje y en el cuidado con esos niños que se dan de una manera eh, con mayor responsabilidad. Finalmente, como para ir avanzando hacia la final de la presentación, cuando yo hacía énfasis sobre la necesidad de poder poner y de hacer este trabajo en la línea de poder centrar el modelo o la forma del modelo de trabajo en un modelo de integración social, tiene que ver no solo con entregar una respuesta hacia las personas que están afectadas por la problemática, sino también de generar un terreno, un tejido, un entramado que dé soporte a estas personas que están transitando en los procesos de recuperación. Y por tanto tenemos diferentes líneas de trabajo que lo que hacen es dar una respuesta para integrar entonces, reconociendo esas trayectorias y esas diversidades y no intentando generar una asimilación, es decir, una asimilación de condiciones que un otro estima que son necesarias para adaptarse, ¿no? Y ahí una de los primeros trabajos ya en el 2017 en referencia como a una intervención más general, que esté anidada en las comunidades o en las instituciones o en la sociedad civil, tiene que ver con la iniciativa de prevención y reducción de estigma. Nosotros en el 2017 pudimos integrar una pregunta abierta a la encuesta nacional de población general, en la que la pregunta decía, ¿qué características tienen las personas que consumen drogas y alcohol? ¿No? Fue todo un desafío integrar una pregunta abierta en un estudio de población general que tiene una amplia, es muy representativo. Entonces ahí lo que salieron fueron respuestas que de alguna manera podían dar, nos daban luces sobre los prejuicios, ¿no? Y sobre la discriminación y una imagen que sanciona, ¿no? A las personas que consumen o que tienen problemas de alcohol y droga. Entre ellas estaban en el primer, como en la primera categoría o mención, se hacía alusión a las personas que eran sucias, ¿no? Violentos, y una serie de juicios negativos asociadas entonces a las personas que estaban afectadas por el consumo de alcohol y droga. Frente a esto, entonces, nosotros en el 2017 licitamos un diseño de un programa de prevención y de reducción en estigma, y en la medida que íbamos trabajando con quien se lo adjudicó, que fue la Universidad Católica de Chile, ¿no? Con un equipo que tiene mucha experiencia en este trabajo, en el que ha estado también en todo lo que tiene que ver con el desarrollo de prevención y estigma en CAMH, en Canadá. Llegamos a la consideración de que este modelo puede tener una base de una oferta programática, pero a la vez es muy necesario tener un plan de acción en reducción de estigma. Y hacemos esta distinción porque en el fondo el fenómeno en la deconstrucción del imaginario social también apela a estos prejuicios o el estigma que tiene que ver con o que se basa a partir del desconocimiento, ¿no? O la ignorancia frente a estos temas, ¿no? Por tanto, es muy importante poder tener un plan que más va en la línea como más política, para también diseminar y sensibilizar a los actores institucionales, disminuyendo el estigma estructural, ¿no? Que también es promovido muchas veces por instituciones, lamentablemente, del Estado. Entonces, es muy necesario que el SENDA, como programa social, pueda sensibilizar a los diferentes actores en las temáticas. Y por otro lado, entonces, se desarrolla un programa en específico de reducción de estigma que tiene 4 componentes. Un componente de comunicación, un componente de capacitaciones, otro componente de fortalecimiento de políticas de pro-recuperación, y esto tiene que ver con el desarrollo de estrategias y de trabajo más en la línea de las familias, las personas, y de vincular a las personas con los programas, ¿no? Con los sujetos que trabajan en esos programas, ¿no? Y el otro componente es el grupo de pares y el fortalecimiento de apoyo mutuo. En el año 2019, este programa se pilotea en las regiones donde está integración social, y fue una experiencia muy interesante. Se piloteó en diferentes modalidades, en una modalidad básica y en una modalidad avanzada, en programas de atención de salud, en programas de tratamiento y en los dispositivos de integración social en VICE y OSL. Otro de la oferta complementaria que está a la base de la promoción de este modelo de integración social tiene que ver con el modelo de inclusión sociocomunitaria, ¿no? Y acá se parte de la base de hacer una distinción importante que tiene que ver con distinguir estos 2 escenarios: el mundo de la vida, que es el mundo más personal, ¿no? El del barrio, el de las juntas de vecinos, el de los grupos más pequeños que tejen en este entramado en un nivel muchísimo menor, ¿no? Que es el mundo de la vida, y el otro está en el mundo del sistema, que son las instituciones, en donde está el Estado, en donde están los diferentes actores y ministerios y la oferta pública. Entonces, la idea es que pudiéramos tener una serie de componentes que pudieran brindar apoyo cuando las personas transitan por estos diferentes escenarios, ¿no? Y actualmente estamos trabajando con también la Universidad Católica y el Centro de Justicia y Sociedad en una propuesta de programa de recuperación basada en pares. ¿Y cómo llegamos a esto en el fondo? Hay un compromiso institucional por trabajar justamente la recuperación y un programa de post-tratamiento. Entonces, cuando la Universidad Católica de Chile va a dar respuesta, ¿no?, a esta necesidad institucional, lo que mira y recoge del trabajo con grupos de expertos internacionales, nacionales y la literatura, es que un elemento decidor y central en la recuperación tiene que ver con este acompañamiento de un par especialista, de una persona que vivió la experiencia y que puede ser un tremendo aporte para sostener entonces muchas veces los procesos a partir de una estrategia más emocional, de un acompañamiento mucho más emocional. Por tanto, dentro de la oferta programática del servicio, lo que no existía o carecía justamente era una propuesta de programa de recuperación basada en pares. Entonces, en lo que hoy estamos en el diseño de esa propuesta hoy contempla dos componentes, un componente de formación de par especialista en recuperación, es decir, de una serie de transferencias más en la línea de las competencias y de la formación a personas que hayan vivido la experiencia y que quieran entonces trabajar o facilitar el acompañamiento. Y este componente entonces de formación sería una formación teórico-práctica en la que se han distinguido ya algunos ámbitos importantes de trabajar, como por ejemplo el modelo de recuperación, las estrategias de trabajo, el ejercicio de la ciudadanía, estigma, ¿no? Por cierto, eh, eso por un lado. Y por otro lado, esta propuesta de diseño contempla justamente el otro componente que tiene que ver con la intervención del par especialista en recuperación, que es el proceso de acompañamiento que se estima que podría ser por un año de este PER, un año que acompaña entonces como a la persona en diferentes aspectos y niveles, y que le va finalmente como brindando un soporte emocional, pero a la vez también ayudándole como un gestor de caso a transitar en los diferentes espacios en la vía más normalizada. Nosotros todavía estamos en el diseño, estamos trabajando en el diseño con la Católica de este programa, no lo hemos terminado, por tanto todavía no tenemos un diseño final para presentarles, ¿no? Y de acuerdo entonces a todo el modelo que pude mencionar, vemos cómo cada una de estas piezas puede ir entonces juntándose y llenando el puzzle, ¿no? hacia la recuperación. Tenemos diferentes iniciativas que son más generales, que apuntan a diferentes poblaciones, a poblaciones que necesitan de alguna manera abrirse, sensibilizarse, generar espacios inclusivos, ¿no? Desprendiéndose un poco de las etiquetas, de los prejuicios, facilitando la integración de los programas, disminuyendo el estigma estructural, ¿no? Y favoreciendo también con un diálogo mucho más centrado en lo que requieren las personas, ¿no? Están los programas, el programa de integración social para población adulta, que mucha de su oferta está en el marco del tratamiento, pero que también está luego de los procesos terapéuticos, y estaría este programa de par especialista en recuperación, que entonces acompañaría a través del seguimiento también de tratamiento en un proceso más de cambio, más ligado hacia las comunidades, ¿no?
Perdón, Daniela, tenemos 2 minutos más.
Terminé justo. Esa era la última diapositiva.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for this very comprehensive presentation on the Chilean experience in implementing this model of social integration and recovery. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all of this amazing program that you guys have developed and are implementing in Chile. So now we have a Q&A session. I have received some questions here in the chat. I am going to start. I know that Stuart had to leave, so but I see that Dave is still here with us. So the first question was addressed to the Lero's presentation. So I'm going to read it in Spanish because it was sent to us in Spanish. So if you give me 1 second. So la pregunta es de Gonzalo Sosa del Ministerio de Justicia de Colombia. Dice, buenos días a todos. Mi pregunta es para Stuart, pero como no está Stuart, le invito a Dave a que nos ayude a contestar. El señor Gonzalo Sosa pregunta, ¿qué herramientas utilizan para medir el programa Lero? Dave, I'm not sure if you were able to hear the interpretation.
You done it in Spanish. I'd need it in English.
Okay, I'm going to read it again. I'm going to try to translate it here. So we have someone from the Ministry of Justice in Colombia, Mr. Gonzalo Sosa. He's asking which tools you use to measure the Lero program.
Okay, so we use individual tools within our own organizations to develop, to assess the success and the outcomes of each organization. We have developed a set of standards using the CHIME model in terms of how people connect, how people engage, hope. So we have a set of standards, but we're looking at further developing them in terms of identifying what we mean by Lero and how you can identify yourself as Lero. And really the peer-based research we've done. So using people of lived experience to gather the evidence, because there's a lot of evidence in American, but there's not so much evidence about the impact of Leros in the UK, and this is what we need to really be building on. So I'm doing a piece of work at the Well at the minute about evidence around managing and supporting and supervising people of lived experience. So there's a lot of statutory organizations that are not lived experience trying to manage people of lived experience, and trying to manage people is very complex. So what you do when someone relapses, what you do when someone has a moment of crisis around re-traumatization, or want to use at that moment in time, and then what is the support you have in place. So a lot of people won't even have a relapse support policy. How, when one of your staff members relapses, what you do you send them back out to where they've come from in addiction, back into the criminal justice, or do you have a support package and a recovery plan you have in place? Now we have that here at the Well, and we've learned all that through all the issues that we've had, and had to develop these policies and put in place. But how you can measure the success of a recovery organisation is the mutual aid groups that develop within the community. So wherever there's a Lero, there's usually a wide mutual aid community that grows from that as well, meaning NA, AA, CA, SMART, and standalone family support, Al-Anon, and other such mutual aid groups. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you very much, Dave, for this very comprehensive answer. We have a few more questions here. Also from Gonzalo Sosa from the Ministry of Justice in Colombia. He's now asking Colette. He says, very interesting model in Colombia. We're also implementing a program with drug treatment court for youth. The Jamaican experience of 21 years with this program is very interesting. So he wants to ask how many youth has been through the program, and which have been the results.
Okay, thanks for that, Gonzalez. I see that he's paying attention because he's asking us all the questions. So thanks for that. For the period up to, I think, 2020, we had about 88 children that would be under 18 engaged in the children drug court. This was a pilot project that was run by Jamaica, and our success rate then was about 26%, with 23 of those children graduating. Since then, however, we are in the child diversion phase. So we have transitioned those children that were in the court into child diversion, where they get more holistic and comprehensive care and referrals to other agencies, so that they will no longer come in conflict with the law or become uncontrollable and cannot be managed by the parents. Because a lot of the referrals came in because of the parents not being able to manage or control them. So it's about 26% success rate. It's a little better for the adults at about 45%. So that's it. For the children, what we've cited as them not being so successful is the lack of parental support. They're going back into the environment that they're coming from, and where drug use is prevalent, is accepted in the communities or in their homes, and just lack of compliance at the time. So that would account for it for the children. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colette. I'm going to question number 3, which is also from Gonzalo Sosa, Colombia. He says, this is to Monica. He says that your presentation was very interesting, that stigma and discrimination are fundamental factors that have an impact on the treatment of people with substance use disorders. He also mentioned that it was very, well, it's more of a comment for you than a question. He also said that it was very interesting how the calculations on the social return on investment, the SROE, where you have, you get 5 times back from what you have invested when doing treatment of people with substance use disorders. So he thanks you for this presentation. We have one more question here from Lida Becerra from FECAT in Colombia, sorry. So she's asking, voy a preguntar en español, ¿cómo logran los apoyos gubernamentales para los programas privados y su evidencia científica? Entonces, no sé si para Daniela.
En materia de vinculación a beneficios sociales, lo que yo les contaba es que en los procesos de tratamiento existe en el SISTRAT, que es el Sistema Informático de Tratamiento, una ficha de necesidades de integración social. Entonces, de alguna manera, lo que se aplica en las personas es este instrumento, el que detecta ciertas necesidades en diferentes ámbitos. Son 9 categorías, en el ámbito de necesidades de capacitaciones, de formación, de empleo, habitabilidad, apoyo social, ámbito judicial, ocio, tiempo libre, y bueno, no recuerdo las otras 2 que se me están pasando. Entonces, eso lo que hace es articular, primero levantar específicamente una necesidad puntual. Como les mencionaba, por ejemplo, en temas de necesidades de ámbito judicial, por ejemplo, ir a un tribunal de familia para ver la tutela o las responsabilidades parentales en torno a la crianza y los hijos. En el ámbito, por ejemplo, para las mujeres, por ejemplo, un elemento central es acercar la oferta a programas de atención a violencia intrafamiliar o violencia de género, a propósito de las altas necesidades y de la experiencia de violencia que tienen las mujeres en los programas. Y eso entonces se articula a través de un gestor de integración social que va a los territorios a buscar entonces esa superación o esa necesidad, a satisfacer esa necesidad, y se la entrega a los programas de tratamiento, como hace el puente entre los programas de tratamiento y estas personas. Y eso se sistematiza en unos sistemas que nosotros tenemos de registros internos propios. Y ahí vamos como en el fondo dando y monitoreando un poco la respuesta institucional.
Thank you so much, Daniela. We have one more question, which I think it's for you, which is how many adults are in these programs? Daniela,
De acuerdo como a las estadísticas del año 2021, en personas únicas estoy hablando, ¿no? Como no de casos, porque en el fondo hay personas que vuelven a entrar a los programas de tratamiento, ¿no? Pero estamos hablando de una población objetivo del programa de 11.680 personas, con una capacidad de población beneficiaria alrededor del 8.000, 9.000.
muchas gracias. We are now approaching the end of our webinar. I want to, but before we end, I want to thank all of our speakers here today for joining us in this very important session. So thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Colette. Thank you, Monica. And thank you, Dave and Stuart, who had to leave. But before we finish, I would like to invite the Demand Reduction Unit Chief, Jimena Kalowski, to deliver her closing remarks. Jimena, welcome, and you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Isa. Bueno, me sumo a los agradecimientos a nuestros panelistas que han estado excelentes. Creo que realmente hemos tenido un webinar de muy buena calidad, revisando diferentes experiencias. Yo he tomado varias notas acá, diferentes experiencias de trabajo de integración social. Y quería destacar algunos aspectos importantes. Primero, todo lo que tiene que ver con la conceptualización respecto a lo que entendemos por integración social o reintegración, y también el concepto de estigma, cómo efectivamente afecta la buena vinculación de las personas con otros, pero también con los sistemas y los servicios gubernamentales. El concepto de autoestigma, por supuesto que creo que es algo muy importante. Mónica también lo refirió en su presentación, pero el concepto de autoestigma y cómo las definiciones técnicas que utilizamos también promueven o enfatizan mucho más el autoestigma, y hace que las personas mantengan niveles elevados de culpa, lo que hace que sientan mucha vergüenza y por lo tanto accedan poco a los programas de tratamiento o de apoyo. Y creo que ese es un desafío que tenemos todavía sobre el cual trabajar, en términos de cómo encontrar una conceptualización que a nivel profesional y técnico nos sirva, pero que también no estimule más el autoestigma de las personas que usan drogas. Luego también quiero destacar, y algo que se ha comentado bastante acá, es por un lado el rol de las organizaciones privadas o sin fines de lucro versus el rol del Estado. Y creo que lo que hemos visto acá con distintos ejemplos ha sido diferentes formas de relación entre Estado, sociedad civil, y lo que queda muy claro que al abordar esta temática necesitamos un trabajo coordinado entre los diferentes actores de la comunidad. Importante que las propuestas y los programas tengan evidencia y vayan levantando evidencia. Si es que es algo que no existe previamente, vayan levantando evidencia y sistematizando los logros y los hallazgos del programa, que creo que también eso ha sido muy interesante respecto a las distintas iniciativas. Y también me quiero quedar con algo que decía Daniela, de estar trabajando en estrategias basadas en pares, que creo que también eso es algo importante. Tiene que ver un poco también con los nuevos currículum o proyectos que se están trabajando, y creo también que en este espacio queda la posibilidad de la colaboración entre diferentes países, y también con nuestros panelistas que generosamente han compartido toda su experiencia y conocimientos el día de hoy. Para nosotros y los países de la región, y tal como lo señaló el embajador Nam, este es un desafío que está pendiente, sobre lo cual todavía tenemos mucho que avanzar, y por lo tanto este tipo de webinars, de seminarios, de encuentros son muy relevantes. Y también conocer, por ejemplo, la estrategia que se lleva en otros países que no son de nuestra región, como lo que ocurre con San Patrignano o con Leros en Reino Unido, también nos permite a nosotros abrir la mente, digamos, a experiencias alternativas distintas, y también en muchas ocasiones muy similares. Quiero agradecer la presentación de todos, por supuesto al preguntador máximo del día de hoy, que fue Gonzalo Sosa de Colombia, pero también a Lida Becerra. Creo que las preguntas que han hecho también van bastante en la línea de saber cómo es posible o cómo se origina o cómo se puede conseguir esta colaboración público-privada que es tan necesaria en nuestros países, donde tenemos muy pocos recursos disponibles y por lo tanto la unión de distintas fuerzas es muy relevante. Así que bueno, solamente agradecerles a todos y todas por haberse conectado el día de hoy, agradecer a Isabel Araújo del equipo de reducción de la demanda de CICAD, que estuvo organizando este excelente webinar. Una vez más, agradecer a Leros, bueno, a Mónica de San Patrignano, que nos ha apoyado muchísimo este año con todo el trabajo, a Daniela Nieto de Senda también, que nos ha compartido esta experiencia desde el diseño hasta la ejecución y cómo se ha ido vinculando con la evidencia, a Colette de Jamaica, que también nos ha mostrado lo importante del trabajo con alternativas al encarcelamiento, con esta población, y bueno, a todos los que se han conectado el día de hoy. También agradecer a nuestros intérpretes que nos han dado el apoyo. De esa manera podemos tener una participación más extensa de los diferentes países de nuestra región. Así que creo que el desafío que nos queda es grande, es importante. Tenemos que mantener este trabajo y por supuesto este es un tema de interés en el cual seguiremos compartiendo y desarrollando nuevos espacios de análisis y discusión. Les deseo que tengan un muy buen resto de día y nos volveremos a ver. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Jimena. Thank you again, everyone. And we hope to see you soon.